Hello and welcome to today's Worksite Wellness Lunch and Learn. We're so glad you could join us. November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, so today we'll take a deep dive into insulin resistance, which is a precursor to type 2 diabetes. Katie Godin from Lifestyle Medical Center will explain what insulin resistance is and provide helpful insight into how our lifestyle and diet can help prevent it. And after the presentation, she'll show us how to make a paleo apple crisp, a fun fall dessert that won't spike your blood sugar too much. Katie has been practicing as a registered dietitian for 17 years. She focuses on helping individuals improve their knowledge and relationship with food and meet their personal health goals. Lifestyle Medical Center is an in network nutrition counseling service. For employees enrolled in the state health plan, both virtual and in person visits are covered at 100% for in network providers. The state health plan has in network dietitians across the state. To find one near you, log into your state health plan portal using the link listed on this slide. As a reminder, everyone who registers for this event will receive a recording of today's presentation as well as the recipe. To find past Lunch and Learn recordings, visit our website at oshr.nc.gov/wellness-webinars. During the presentation, you can submit questions through the Q&A, and members of our NC Flex team will help answer them. Additionally, Katie will save a few minutes at the end of the presentation for any questions we're unable to get to. Now, let's lunch and learn.
Thank you, Sierra. Hey, everybody. Nice to have you here today, and hard to believe that next week is Thanksgiving. However, this is one of my favorite recipes. I make it every year for Thanksgiving, and so I'm really excited to feature it today. So maybe it will inspire you to try it as a nice, healthy alternative to some of the desserts. Not that I'm encouraging anyone to not make their most favorite nostalgic desserts this season, but it's nice to have a fun, healthy option to include at the same time. But first, before we get into the demonstration side of things, we are going to talk about insulin resistance. So with November being American Diabetes Month, we thought this would be a nice topic to feature. And most importantly, after kind of understanding hopefully what insulin resistance is, we want to talk through strategies to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. As Sierra mentioned, I am a dietitian with Lifestyle Medical Centers, and really enjoy connecting with people. Doing the counseling side of things is, something that I have been passionate about for many years. And I'm fortunate enough to get to do the presenting side of things at this point, which I also think is a fun twist. But getting to kind of have the more personal relationship with people, we really find value in that. So if you guys have been thinking about, learning more about lifestyle, please click on our link there below and learn more. Don't wait till the new year. Okay, that's my only encouragement. Whether you seek assistance with lifestyle or somewhere else, don't wait till the new year. Start now. There's never sometimes there's never the perfect time, but don't put it off if you've been thinking about it. All right. Let's talk first, before we get into everything, about what insulin even is. Maybe you guys, of course, have heard the term insulin, and some of you may be very well versed in it. But let's talk about what that hormone is, and then let's also talk about what it means to be insulin resistant. And then we'll get into more about that in the following slides. So insulin is a hormone. It's produced by the pancreas, and it helps ultimately to take blood sugar when you eat food that has sugar in it. Any food that has sugar, fruit sugar, processed sugar, any type of sugar that you put into your body. Insulin is going to be that hormone that's responsible for taking that blood sugar and then putting it into the cells to be utilized for energy. So as you probably can imagine, just by the term resistance, what eventually happens over time is, and we'll talk about why that is, but insulin resistance is when your body becomes less responsive to this important hormone, insulin. And so there can be temporary causes of insulin resistance. So I'll kind of give you a quick reference to what that might be. So let's say we have a really poor night of sleep. We can have some insulin resistance occur the following day. So sometimes people might find, I'm just a little bit more hungry today than I am normal days when I get a good night's sleep. So that could be some of that insulin resistance setting in. And hopefully you'll understand the why behind that example here as we get further along into the presentation. But what we want is the temporary situations are what they are. It's the chronic situation. So chronic stress, poor sleep, dietary considerations, and lack of exercise, just general exercise in our life. These are things that can create us to have more of the chronic insulin resistance, which is something we want to really be paying attention to. And why it matters? Well, we kind of discussed that in the title of the presentation, but it can, when we have this insulin resistance over time, not 1 or 2 days of it, but over time, over a lengthy amount of time, it can eventually lead to prediabetes, and then it can lead to type 2 diabetes. So the best thing that we can do to help prevent this is hopefully, learn some of these dietary considerations, lifestyle considerations. However, we also want to, be taking a peek with your preventative health care, going into your doctor's appointments yearly. When you come and see us, we always, unless there might be the one-off here where we decide not to check an A1C, but a lot of times we are checking a hemoglobin A1C or a fasting insulin. So just real quick side note with the lab side of things. So an A1C is a measure of your blood sugar over a 3-month period of time. And there's a certain number that should be. And if it's, if it's greater than 5.6, sorry, I didn't put this information. Maybe I should have put this information in my presentation as I'm starting to talk about it. But if it's over 5.6, that's going to indicate that pre-diabetes. And the higher it goes, that's when it's getting into that type 2 diabetes diagnosis. So sometimes we can have normal A1Cs, but still have a high fasting insulin, which means insulin is still circulating in our body. It's not working. It's not, our body's resistant and not being utilized properly. So a certain number is going to indicate that you have insulin resistance, even if your A1C is normal. And that's something that we talk to you guys about in sessions. And hopefully you're having communication with your healthcare providers about stuff like this too. If, there is that risk of you potentially being insulin resistant. So that's why preventative healthcare is so important. And again, coming into our office, having a conversation with us about stuff like this too. All right, let's just, we have a little visual here. We always like to kind of use this lock and key scenarios. Sometimes I'm a visual person, so I thought I would put a visual here for everyone. But think of insulin as the key. It's going to open the door. The cell is the door. And so insulin is going to open up that cell door, and it's going to allow that blood sugar to go into the cell. And so it's when that key stops working, right? So that's when we have this insulin resistance going on. And what's going on is a large amount of blood sugar, let's say, enters your bloodstream. Your pancreas is going to be responsible for pumping out that hormone insulin to hopefully get that blood sugar into your cell. Now, over time, your cells are going to potentially stop responding well if there's a large amount of insulin being dumped out all of the time. That will cause your blood sugars to remain high, and pancreas is getting signaled again to release more insulin because the blood sugar isn't going anywhere. Now, eventually, your pancreas cannot keep up with this vicious cycle. So that's when we have insulin resistance, which again sets that stage for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So hopefully you guys have a little bit of an understanding of what you're looking at. I know this is kind of a more in-depth, maybe complicated topic, but hopefully you understand just a little bit better of what you're looking at with how insulin resistance occurs. Let's talk about some risk factors when it comes to insulin resistance. Who's at risk of developing this and what should we be looking out for? So Overweight, obesity, this is something that look at just because an increased amount of fat, increased adiposity can interfere with insulin signaling. So it can disrupt that hormone. It's not the only thing here. I think sometimes it doesn't mean if we have excess fat, then we're going to be insulin resistant, is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of things that kind of have to be occurring. So uncontrolled blood sugars would definitely be a risk factor for all the reasons I kind of just talked about. High cholesterol and specifically triglycerides and LDL, which is that bad cholesterol you've probably heard of or get checked every year, hopefully, and a low HDL, which is the good cholesterol that we want floating around. So excess of the bad cholesterol, triglycerides can interfere also with that insulin signaling. So we're not getting the appropriate signals to release insulin. And that's something that we want. And that's why we get labs done each year, you guys. Age can be a factor. There can be a lot of things going on why there's an age risk factor here. Sometimes with age, we have decreased physical activity, which can in turn maybe lead to increased visceral fat. And so that can put us at risk of that insulin resistance. A family history, just generally being inactive. We're going to talk about physical activity's role in further slides. Individuals who smoke, a history of gestational diabetes. Again, it doesn't mean if you had gestational diabetes, you're going to have insulin resistance and in turn type 2. So it's just a potential risk factor here. And then other diseases, disorders, PCOS, sleep apnea, and then Cushing's syndrome, which is a condition that causes a high amount of cortisol in the body, which is a stress hormone. We're going to talk about that in a few slides as well, and how that relates to insulin resistance. So when it comes to exact causes here, we know there's some risk factors involved, but these exact causes and etiology, it's not completely clear. It's still being researched. There are some acquired causes, meaning you're not born with them, that can be associated. So again, kind of saying a lot of the same things here, but hopefully you're starting to get the understanding of it all. But excess body fat, especially in the abdominal area, physical inactivity, food choices for sure. So we're going to talk about some really good dietary modifications to be considering, but specifically increased processed carbohydrates. A lot of times people think, well, I don't want diabetes, so should I be eating a lot of carbs? And I tell people, well, it's not about that exactly. Yes, I encourage people to eat a variety of every macronutrient. It's the types of carbohydrates, and then it's how we're eating those carbohydrates. So I like to kind of encourage people to take this viewpoint of it's not what we're eating all of the time. It's really how we're eating the food. I think that can be a really powerful tool so that you feel like you're not in this state of, oh, I guess I just can't ever eat that again. And because that's not the case. That isn't how it necessarily works. But we do want to keep an understanding of what are some good foods to be kind of including in our day to day. Saturated fats can be something that can be linked to that insulin resistance as well with dietary considerations. And then certain medications. So steroids, blood pressure medications, there's certain things that when you're on them, it's good to be aware of what those side effects are. We can't always take help that we're on these types of medications, but there are other things, lifestyle things that we can be considering when we are on them. Now, when it comes to the signs of insulin resistance, typically, when you're kind of maybe just embarking on this, you're not having a lot of symptoms. They're not as present right at first. But when your blood sugars remain high for a long period of time, you can have certain symptoms pop up. So anytime we have unexplained weight loss, we should try to be understanding that. So it can be a sign of insulin resistance. So we start to kind of eat away at muscle and fat when blood glucose isn't being utilized for energy. So that's kind of that's a severe case. I would say definitely anyone who's having unexplained weight loss, you want to check that out immediately. Increased thirst, frequent urination, increased hunger, and again, blurred vision. These are all things that can happen. It doesn't mean if you are really hungry for a few days, you have insulin resistance, right? So I think it's good to just get the bigger picture in mind. And again, if anything, just any signs or symptoms, we kind of know our bodies. If you're starting to have anything go on where it's all of a sudden, we should be checking that out. We should be trying to understand that. Okay, so let's get into the strategies here. So, what are some lifestyle strategies to improve that insulin sensitivity and ultimately reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes? Well, of course, some healthy nutrition habits are important, right? So, this is something that we talk to about with people every single day. And if you're coming to see me or any of our dietitians, we are going to be talking to you, whether you have insulin resistance or you don't. We're talking to everyone about the importance of eating more fiber and having more macronutrient balance at your meals. So, these two things really help to stabilize your blood sugars. And that's really what we're trying to do here is, not have too much sugar being dumped in at one time without those other macronutrients to help slow it down. So carbs in general, processed carbohydrates, specifically sugar, things that don't have a lot of fiber to them, they're digested really, really quickly. And, sometimes they don't keep us full, so we keep wanting to eat more of them. So we could have larger quantities of them as a result, and then we're having a large quantity of blood sugar in our cells. We're having a lot of that insulin signaling occurring, and this is the repetition of that type of behavior that can create that insulin resistance. But when we have more whole foods in our diet, so we've got a lot of things pictured on this slide, but fruits, veggies, beans, grains that are whole, like brown rice and quinoa and sweet potato, and nice hearty seeds, nuts and seeds, chia, hemp, flax, any type of nut. So these are really good fiber sources that helps to slow down the digestion of that carbohydrate that you just ate. And one tip that we'll tell people a lot is, let's say, you are someone who knows that you have some insulin resistance going on. Maybe there's prediabetes, and we're really trying to work towards not it turning into type 2. So this would be stuff we would talk about is getting more fiber, eating more whole foods. But I might also suggest that you really start to work on the protein and the fiber from your meal first before you eat anything else that might be a little bit more sugary. And so that's a little tip for eating dessert. So kind of thinking about that. I don't want people to feel like, you can't eat anything that's sweet. But if you eat something that has protein or healthy fats, some good fiber in it first, that will help slow down the digestion of that more simple sugar that's coming into the mix as well. So macronutrient balance refers to the balance of protein, carb, and fat when you eat. And that's going to be just this nice way of keeping those blood sugars steady, not having really sharp spikes and then dips, because that's what happens. Um, Lean protein sources and including more plant-based protein can certainly be a goal for, I think, everybody. It doesn't mean that you have to be a vegetarian or strictly plant-based here, but having more plant-based sources of protein, when you think of, beans, for example, that's one that comes to my mind. I love beans. I try to encourage people to eat it at least 2 times a week, if not more. If you love them, eat them more. But these are great sources of fiber as well. So that's kind of that dual. We're getting our protein, but we're also getting in some good fiber with that protein source. So I've said this, but I've put it on there. Focus on carb quality versus no carbs at all. Now, some people decide that they want to do certain dietary modifications like low carb or a ketogenic diet. It is not something that I tell people that they have to do in order to improve their blood sugar stability, but it is an option and we're here to support it, but it is not the only way. Uh, Decreasing our intake of saturated fats. As I kind of mentioned before, triglycerides, high LDL, this can be a risk factor for that insulin resistance. So there's lots of reasons to keep our saturated fat in control. So we talk to people about a range of 5 to 10% of their calories. We help people individualize that for people so they understand what that means for them. But all of our meal plans and all of the things that we really talk to people about include lots of foods that would put this all together and make it a little bit easier to kind of see visually too. Structured meal timing is really important for insulin sensitivity. So when we go a little bit longer between meals, it helps to give insulin a bit of a break. So if you're someone that's struggling with insulin resistance, what we want to do is help you to understand how eating more of the right things are going to keep you full for a longer period of time. So when you go that 4 to 5 hours, if you're going to go longer than that, though, 6 to 7 plus, I do encourage people to have a balanced snack in between. It is about some strategy here. So we try to help people understand that part too. But giving insulin that break can be something that improves that insulin sensitivity. And then, of course, added sugars. It isn't that you can't have them. I've been talking to people about this throughout the holiday season too. So having an understanding of, and we've talked about this, it's not been that long ago since we kind of talked about added sugars, but 25 grams per day for men or less, or excuse me, women, and 35 grams per day or less for men. These are just some standard recommendations. So you see, it isn't that you can't have any. It's what's the threshold, what's the goal? And as I mentioned before, what's the strategy for how to eat them? That's really what it's all about. Not just completely avoiding, but being really strategic in how you're doing it. So physical activity, very important component here. Exercise does so much for ourselves when it comes to our mental health and our physical health. And when we get into the next slide where we're talking about stress and sleep, physical activity can impact both of those things in such a positive way. So when it comes to physical activity, we should all be doing it. It's going to look very different for each individual. So we try to individualize everything. We actually have an exercise physiologist on staff now, which has been kind of great. So to develop a bit more personalized plans for people. And I think that's been really helpful. But exercise in general helps insulin receptor signaling. Strength training specifically will help build lean muscle mass. That actually helps with your glucose storage capacity, and that can help with your body's ability to regulate your blood sugar. So when it comes to these exercise recommendations, I have it kind of at the bottom of this slide, but we're really wanting people to strive for 150 minutes of cardio each week with at least 2 days of some full body strength slash resistance exercises. And you can work up to that and get that in a variety of different ways. So again, it's not just one way of exercising. It doesn't mean gym membership. It doesn't mean, spending a lot of money, it taking up all of your time. I think it's just understanding the value in it. And over time, hopefully that leads to you wanting to do more. But sometimes we just need to start with something really small. So that last point there, focusing on small moves throughout the day. So exercise snacks, if you will. I know that kind of seems like a silly term, but I heard it and it has stuck with me. So pretty much viewing exercise as these little bits, like we're grazing on it all day long. I've kind of been talking with people about that a lot throughout this holiday season, and I've actually been trying to do it for myself. I find that you can get really caught up, all of us, in sitting for prolonged periods of time. And that is actually not great for our insulin sensitivity. So getting up, and if you have 1 to 2 minutes of your time, doing 10 body weight squats, and maybe doing some arm circles forward, arm circles backwards. So these are things that we can do throughout our day to kind of break up the prolonged sitting. So, and then also on here, I'm kind of going out of order. Sorry for that. Post-meal walks. This is something that if you can start doing, will do wonders for lots of things. Can help with, especially lunchtime. I get that maybe we can't go for a walk after every single meal. So I will have people pick maybe between 1 and 2 meals. So at least one a day if possible. It can help with your digestion as well as your insulin sensitivity immediately. And so exercising can help with fat glucose uptake without using too much insulin. So this is such a powerful tool for anyone that is struggling with blood sugar stability. I definitely highly recommend it. And I know walking pads are really common right now, especially as the weather gets a little bit cooler. But North Carolina doesn't get that cold. We can bundle up, wear a hat, go midday if you can. Okay. So some more creative ways to move more here. As I just mentioned, 10 to 15-minute walks post meals when you're able to. I also talked about those little exercise snacks, 1 to 2 minutes of body weight or weighted moves spread out throughout your day to kind of break up that sitting. Step challenges. I know that you guys have just been doing the Miles for Wellness. I can't remember if it's over or if you're still in it. I love this time of year for you guys. I think this is so fantastic when we have step goals, accountability, motivation. This is something that can be all throughout the year. Doing movement while you're watching TV. So I know that that can sometimes motivate me. And so, especially when it's a little bit cooler outside and you're wanting to kind of be inside, it gets dark early. These are ways to get yourself motivated. Walking work meetings when you're able to. Maybe it's just a phone call you're having to listen to, and you can just pop in some, AirPods or whatever, and go out and listen to your call. Those are some good strategies. And then ultimately planning for your movement each week. So you want them to include those little micro movements, but you want to have some structured longer stretches included as well. Let's talk about sleep's impact on insulin resistance for a second. So I mentioned this earlier, but poor sleep, which is usually equal to less than 6 hours a night, can result in that temporary insulin resistance the following day. So it can actually also disrupt those hunger hormones. It can create this desire to want to snack. These cravings for sugar kind of are existing, and it can raise our stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol has a direct impact on blood sugar, increasing that insulin release, and poor sleep can increase our inflammatory markers, which can affect that insulin signaling. So you guys listen. I know that sleep is tricky. Sleep is tricky for so many reasons. And there are a lot of things about sleep that we can't control. So when I talk about sleep and stress, I realize that that is very sensitive because, yeah, like I said, a lot of it can be out of our control. So I have people focus on what is in your control versus what's not. We have a newborn baby, right? We cannot help that that our sleep pattern is going to be all over the place. And there's so many other examples, right? So what we can do is work on trying to develop a healthy sleep regimen. So again, it might not be picking everything on this list to start. I get that that's a tricky situation too. I know I talk with a lot of people and I feel it for myself. It's that end of the night. Maybe I don't want to not watch TV, 60 minutes before bed. I want to watch a show, so there are things that we can work towards slowly. But unwinding 60 to 90 minutes before bed does help to lower your cortisol. It helps with your melatonin production and it helps with that insulin sensitivity as a result. So it's good to know. Sometimes, I find power in just knowing the connection to all of the things, and that helps me to, be more accountable for doing all of the things. Aiming to eat your last meal 2 to 3 hours before bed. So we want to try to prevent evening glucose spikes if we are dealing with prediabetes, insulin resistance. It can also impact our sleep when we're eating too close to bedtime, especially if you have reflux. It can impact our melatonin production. So there's a lot of reasons to try to avoid eating 2 to 3 hours before bed. I have lots of strategies that can help with when it comes to that. And so these are things that we do talk about within those sessions with people. Movement after dinner, as I mentioned, 10 minutes is plenty. You do not have to go out for a 45-minute walk. You can move around your house. You can, do those little exercise snacks, but promoting that insulin sensitivity, whether outside, inside, dance party in your house, just moving around after dinner can be really helpful. Consistent bedtimes each night. This is something that will help just kind of keep you in line, that natural circadian rhythm. We tend to fall asleep better when we fall asleep, and our body gets used to going to bed at the same time every single night. It loves that rhythm. Limiting caffeine, right? Like that's kind of probably obvious for some, but maybe we don't realize how much caffeine is impacting our sleep until we try to reduce it. So you may be very sensitive and not realize it. So if you're someone who does tend to drink afternoon highly caffeinated beverages, I would try reducing that to see if that helps. Lowering your cortisol right before bed with maybe one of the following strategies. You don't have to do all three. You can, but I think a better mindset is to just say, okay, let's pick one and see how we like it. But a minute of structured breathing, a body scan, which can be self-guided. There's lots of apps. There's, some podcasts that I really like, but essentially just kind of going from head to toe or toe to head, however you want to do it, and just kind of taking it in. Again, guided would help me most with those body scans. And then, or 5 minutes of journaling before bed. You could also read, especially if it's like a nice, maybe calm story, maybe not some kind of horror, situation. I don't know what everyone likes to read. I'm not a reader. I want to be, but anyway. I'll move on. Morning light if able. So this helps shut off melatonin and aids with that normal circadian rhythm that can help you fall asleep in evenings easier. I have always found that very interesting. Who would have thought morning light will help you sleep better in the evenings? But it can. Okay, just a quick sample evening routine here, which can be adjusted, of course, but just to give you an idea. Maybe we're eating dinner at 6:30. We go for our quick little 10-minute walk at 7 or movement around the house. We're dimming those lights at 8:30. Or maybe we have just some screen filters on, some blue light glasses, something that's not going to be so harsh that time of night before bed. And then around that 9 o'clock hour, we're shower, maybe a little stretching, a little reading, one of those relaxation exercises, and then in bed, lights out. So again, this can all be adjusted timing wise here, but just to give you a little example of what that could look like for you. All right, so let's talk about stress here. So stress, as I mentioned, increases that stress hormone, which is called cortisol, and that has a direct relationship to increasing those blood sugars. Stress can trigger this release of adrenaline, and that adrenaline is what signals the body to release glucose. It's actually very necessary mechanism here. This is something that we need if we're in a very stressful situation. The problem is we're having the chronic stress all of the time, whereas this is just intended to be situational and used here and there. So over time, this will increase inflammation, interfering with insulin's receptor function. Again, can cause issues with eating, as I've kind of talked about, increased cravings as a result. And in turn, our sleep is disrupted. So it's good to have these stress reducing strategies alongside that sleep regimen, which can be dual. You know, that 5 minutes of breathing could be something you're doing at night, helps in turn with stress, helps in turn with sleep. Those 10-minute walks, you see, the point here is that it is all working together. And that's what's so important for us to, us to connect to. Journaling, some yoga, some gentle stretching, social connection. Obviously, there's a lot of self-care activities that you can maybe write down that you enjoy, that you try to build into your week, and build these in on that daily, weekly basis as much as possible. Thank you, guys. Okay, I am really excited. And some references here. There was a lot of information today. So if you guys want to, hit up one of these references and look at some of these sites to gather more info, read it a little bit more, always welcome that. So we are going to cook one of the most delicious recipes that I make. I know. I love it so much. And so paleo apple crisp, let's talk about what that means. So maybe you guys have heard about the paleo diet before. So basically, it's supposed to mimic the Stone Age diet or Paleolithic era. This is not something that I am telling you you need to follow. It just so happens to be called that, and it fits that dietary regimen, and that's fine. I'm eating it because it's absolutely delicious. So it is grain-free, so gluten-free and dairy-free. And I appreciate that for when I'm serving it to a lot of people, because there are a lot of allergies out there. And for that reason, there's a lot of things in here that are a lot of healthy fat focused. And so I'm really happy about that part too. As I talked about before, with the intake of a lot of sugar, which this really doesn't have, the most sugar in it, I think, is 4 total tablespoons of maple syrup, which I think we could probably dial back to 3, and it would be just as sweet and lovely, because that all those apples that are involved are so nice. But we've got a lot of fiber going on from the apple. I leave the skin on, and then from all of the nuts that are involved. So lots of healthy fats going into the mix. And fat, as I mentioned before, fat and protein. So both of these macronutrients help to slow down the digestion of the sugar. So this is really great to have if you struggle with blood sugar stability. So someone who has diabetes, pre-diabetes, insulin resistant, or not, you can eat this and it would be a nice option for you. All right, so let's go through the ingredients here. I am going to prep my apples first. So with this recipe, there's 2 parts. There's an apple filling part, and then there's the topping that is going to be going on top. So the crisp. All right, so let me scoot you a little closer. And we have hopefully a nice little view of all of these pretty apples. So I got 3 Honeycrisp large apples. This calls for 5 medium. Okay, so I have found over many years of making this that 3 large Honeycrisp apples is plenty. And so that's what I'm using. And then we are going to mix in, I'm going to bring over my apple filling. ingredients here, and I'll just kind of talk through them. I have 1.5 tablespoons of some almond flour. So this is a nice gluten-free option. So great for baking. So I use that a lot with stuff like this. We have, let's see, a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of some vanilla. We have a little mixture here of mostly cinnamon. So there's a teaspoon of cinnamon and then just a little pinch of nutmeg. Lovely. These combination of flavors, very fall. I have a tablespoon of maple syrup. And then we just have a little bit of water to help hydrate them and help them, be really, really soft and have a nice texture when they're cooking. So what I'm going to do, you'll see me do, is add all of those things into my bowl of apples. And I'm just going to mix that all up. And then I'm going to pour it in my pan, which I'll bring over. And then we're going to make the crisp topping. All right, guys, so what you saw me do there, and I didn't explain it before, but I had a 1/4 cup of some water that I just drizzled over the top of these apples. And we're just gonna set those to the side, and I'm gonna make the crisp topping now, and then we'll put it all together before we put it into the oven, all right? Let me talk through the crisp ingredients. So for the crisp ingredients, we have 3/4 cup of some chopped pecans, a 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts, 1/3 a cup of some shredded unsweetened coconut flakes. If you don't like coconut, you can completely leave that out. That isn't necessary. Although that's what I love about this is that it does have a little bit of a coconut, but it's really okay if you don't anyway. A 1/2 cup of almond flour, 1/4 a cup of coconut oil. Let's just side note on the coconut oil thing for just a second, because I know sometimes people will ask me, but isn't coconut oil really not great for you? Because it has saturated fat, and that is true. Everyone, yes, it does have saturated fat, and it is not an oil that I encourage people to use on a daily basis. So there's so many lovely things that are going on in this recipe that I like to look at the bigger picture, and I like to use coconut oil very strategically within my baking for certain things that I just really enjoy with that flavor. And so and that richness that I like. So it's just something that I will not use for this apple crisp recipe. But if you want to substitute and not use coconut oil, you could use butter, like a vegan butter. You could use ghee, although vegan butter does have a little bit of coconut oil involved in that, just so you know, but not pure coconut oil. And then what else? Like an avocado oil you could probably use. So anyway, just in case anyone had any questions on that. And I haven't even asked if there are some specific questions, just feel free to let me know and I can help answer anything.
The main question It's funny that you gave some alternatives for the coconut oil because people are wanting alternatives for the almond flour. Could you use any type of flour?
This is using almond flour because they want it to be grain-free, gluten-free. So, but yeah, you could use an all-purpose flour. You could just use regular flour because I get that almond flour is not always something that people are using for other things. So if you feel like I don't really want to go out and purchase this almond flour because it is not cheap. So I will say that. It is a bit more of an expensive option. You could use regular flour and that would be okay. Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's see, where were we? Yeah, the coconut oil, there's 3 tablespoons of maple syrup, a teaspoon of the vanilla extract, 2 teaspoons of the ground cinnamon, and a quarter teaspoon of the nutmeg and the salt. So as you can see, it's really a lot of the same ingredients that was in the filling. We're just adding in some of those additional things like the nuts and the coconut and the oil. Okay. All right. I'm just using my Ninja. You can use any food processor blender that you have. It does help to have a blender for this recipe, just so that you can kind of get everything chopped up really finely so that it's easy to kind of mash and press down on top of the apples. So I'm just going to add all those ingredients into my food processor and process it up, and then I'll show it to you, and then we'll put it on the apples. All right, guys, it doesn't take much. It's already pretty pulverized. Those nuts are really already chopped, and everything else is just, doesn't need a lot of chopping. So that's a nice thing. You don't have to do a lot of work here. I'm going to pour this in a little bowl, and then I'll bring my apples over and just press it down on top. Just 1 second. really quick, you guys. First of all, I didn't really show you what this looked like, but you know, it's hard to see, isn't it? What am I doing showing it to you like that? So it's just a nice little kind of crumble here that I'm putting on top. It's one of the most delicious things you've ever had in your life, too. I mean, I can't tell you how good that topping is. So what I'm going to do is just try to cover the apples, you know, as best I can with what I got here. It pretty much will, it'll cover all of it really well. But I will start to probably use my fingers just a little bit, excuse me, to kind of press it down a little bit. And then we're going to pop it in the oven. So that's what I'll do right now is just finish putting the crisp topping on the apples.
Katie, one person's wondering, would it be okay to use honey instead of maple syrup? Which it feels like probably, yeah.
Yeah, those two things I feel like you can just use you know, kind of mix and match whenever whatever you have on hand. Maybe there's one that you kind of like better. I think ultimately they're going to provide the same sweetness factor there. So, but yes, you could do either the maple syrup or the honey.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And then really quick, a question related to sugars, kind of. Do
Yeah.
alternative sugars have an impact on insulin resistance? You know,
So
your like Splenda, those things.
yes, yes, those over time can also have very similar effects, and um, I think that we think having a lot of artificial sweeteners is going to be better for us, but the impact that it can have on our insulin sensitivity and on our gut health, these are things that are still really being researched and studied. But we know at this point that they are not always just linked to lower calorie, weight loss, and con- diabetes control here. So, my suggestions for people would not be to go out there and all of a sudden replace all sugar with artificial options. Now, as we talked about maybe a few months back, I think. I can't remember now when it was, but those naturally derived alternative sweeteners, that's a little bit different, like monk fruit and stevia and things like that. Allulose is another option. These are not as much of an issue as like a Splenda or an aspartame or those types, saccharin, those types of or really chemically alternative sweeteners.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, guys. So we have our crisp. So what I'm going to do, which of course you aren't going to, you know, be with me when this is done. So of course I have a finished product ready to go to show you a serving and how I like to eat it. But what we'll do is this will go in a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes uncovered. And then we'll take it out and we will cover it with some foil and bake it for another 15 minutes. So pretty simple. I mean, this recipe is involved. As you can see, there were, you know, some measuring. There's a lot of measuring sometimes with baking. The only thing that really I had to kind of labor with would have been those 3 apples that I cut up, which didn't take me but, you know, 5 minutes maybe. So it's such a nice, it just makes the house smell really good. It's really tasty. So I hope that you guys try it. I'm going to put it in the oven and then I'm going to grab something out of the refrigerator and then show you guys how I like to serve it. Okay. So a serving of this particular recipe is a ninth of it. So eighth or ninth is kind of where I go with it. I think it's easier with my dish to kind of cut it down the middle once and then one, two, three, four. So I have 8 servings. So that's what I usually do. And it is not necessarily low calorie here, but it's nutrient dense. So there's around 250 calories for a serving. But there's fiber, there's a little bit of protein from those nuts, but it's mostly a lot of healthy fat. Where did I put hold on 1 second. The recipe will give you the nutrition facts. I love real food dietitians. This is someone that I have been following and doing. I'm sure I've done other recipes for you guys from them. Follow them on social if you do that kind of thing. Look up their blog. They have lovely real food, as hence their name, but just really good recipes. They're tasty. They're delicious. So anyway, this has, let's see, 22 carbs but 18 grams of fat. So there's almost a 1-to-1 ratio of fat and protein and fat and carbohydrate, which is great for that blood sugar control. There's 4 grams of fiber and let's see, 15 grams of sugar. They've not isolated out the added sugar. There's no way there's 15 grams of added sugar because this grams of sugar is including apples. So I would assume it's maybe a third of that number. So 5 if we're looking at added sugar. So it's a really great one. Like I said, what I like to serve with mine is you can use other whipped topping if you would like to, but I love it's a dairy free. So for anyone that's dairy free, this is great. I know it's going with the coconut theme here, guys, but it really is delicious. And so a little dollop of this little cocoa whip on top. That's what I'm going to do right now. And then I like to take just a little bit of additional cinnamon and nutmeg and sprinkle it over the top. I promise I'm going to show you. Okay. All right. Delicious apple crisp. It's so tasty. I hope you guys try it. It's going to be really hard to not eat this. I won't eat it in front of you, but I wish you could try it. I'm so sorry. But yes, so good. So it was really fun to make this for you guys. Any last minute questions? Anything at all?
One thing, and this is less about the recipe, more about the presentation.
Yeah, that's okay.
You referred to structured meal timing, 4 to 5 hours between meals. They're curious if grazing throughout the day is worse in terms of insulin resistance and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly could have talked about that a little bit more with that, excuse me, structured meal timing part. But yes, that's what we were trying to get away from is grazing. So what happens when we graze throughout the day is sometimes we feel like we're going to eat less. We end up always eating more. And what we're doing is, especially if we're grazing on, a lot of times we're probably not grazing on fiber and protein. I mean, maybe we are, and that's fantastic. You know, certain individuals, like I said, we're not a one size fits all program here. I mean, there are people that come to us that are kind of athletes who are needing to eat more frequently than that, and their structure of eating looks very different. And other examples exist in that too. So, but in general, going a little bit longer in between your meals, around that 4-hour mark, I feel like is pretty realistic. That will help give insulin a break if we're kind of constantly, little handful of pretzels, or let me have this, 4 or 5 crackers and something. Or, if we're doing that 1 to 2 hours, we're just constantly pumping out insulin all of the time. So I talk to people about the why, why are they feel like they need to graze, and hopefully by increasing protein, increasing fiber at meals, they find they can go a little bit longer. Honestly, sometimes drinking fluids a little bit more throughout the middle of your meal time can help to subside some of that hunger that can really just be you being thirsty. So we want to understand why someone's grazing like they're doing. But yes, long answer, but yes, that is something that can impact your insulin sensitivity is eating too frequently throughout the day.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. No
Mhm.
other questions here, but thank you so much for everything you shared, Katie. And we will
Yeah,
see you again in December to talk about immunity boosting foods.
sounds good. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I'll see you in December.